Well, good morning. How are we doing today? So good to see you. I'm going to have some fun today. I don't know if fun's the right word, but we're going to do something different today. It's a couple things. Number one, my name is Russ. If it's your first time here, welcome. We're honored that you're here. I get the honor of being the senior pastor at Resurrection Church. These are my friends, Kent and Carol Scott. They're going to be with us today. Can you guys welcome them? Kent, yeah. They both serve in a lot of the ministries of our church, including Grief Share, and Kent also is an elder, so he knows more about me than probably most people want to know about me. As we're kind of jumping in today, a couple things, though, as to why we're doing what we're doing, and then one just as an announcement. So it's been a crazy week. We had a flood in the foyer, so literally we became the River Campus earlier this week. There also was a leak and a flood through the ceiling of the Nile. The water got shut off at the Nile, and this morning there was a break-in in our downtown office. So all I'm trying to say is we're getting closer and closer to ticking off Satan, and he's really trying to bark because the resurrection has taken his teeth away, and it's been quite the interesting week. Today is my 12th wedding anniversary with my wife, and she was gracious enough to say, you can preach on our anniversary, and I'm thankful for that. And I just want to read a scripture to kind of set up everything. We've been in a marriage series. We've been talking about not just paying attention to the first day, but honoring your spouse and honoring God until the last day, and that being a real goal and a real challenge. Philippians 1:6, it says this, I am sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. And so Paul is encouraging a church that's been discouraged and they've gone through the challenges and the turmoil of life. And he's saying, hey, in spite of the circumstance, in spite of the difficulties you've come through, there is this resting conviction that I have that the God who started the work will not abandon you in the middle of it. And that has been our hope for many of our marriages in this season, especially if you come to a point of difficulty, that you would know that the God who was with you as a witness on the first day will sustain and carry you to the last day. And then for many of our couples, especially in this service, we wanted to do something different. I'm preaching 3 messages today. We're going to do a message with Kent and Carol here. Then I'm going to go preach a message on dating and sex at 9 o'clock downtown. And then I'm going to preach a message on Ephesians 5 at 11 o'clock that will stream over there at 11 again. And then we'll put all of that content up on our social media stuff, YouTube, all of that for you to watch it. And so it's going to be a heavy day, a lot going on. But, well, thank you. Grab the microphones. Let's chat for a bit here. So when we were talking to people in the audience at 8 o'clock, one of the big things that we saw was that this series was really hard for them because they had lost their spouse. And now there wasn't a marriage to work on, and they were working through that. Now, you guys are a happy married couple to everyone that knows you, but you were married before this, and that was because you both walked with your spouse as your first spouse to their eternity, and you still were here. And so Kent, kind of give us the background on your first spouse, your marriage, what that was like, and then kind of the difficulty there. And then Carol, would you do the same?
Yes.
My first wife was named Janice, and by the way, I've got 2 of my daughters and my son-in-law down here.
Hey.
So I'm pretty nervous about this.
I told you could say the word that Pastor Ted wouldn't let you say, though.
I better not. There's
Okay.
too many of those. Yeah. Janice and I were married in North Dakota many years. We were 40-plus years. So many, I can't even remember.
You told me you were married so long and it was so good that you forgot.
I've forgotten how many years, but it was more than 40. And she was a beautiful lady. We grew together. Both of us, when we were married, were probably what you might call cultural Christians. Mm-hmm. Both of us had been in church all of our life, and it was the thing to do. My family went to church. It was not a really biblical church, and I grew up not really hearing the gospel until I was in high school. And when the gospel was explained to me, it caught my attention, and so I made a commitment. But throughout my college years and early life, you wouldn't be able to tell it.
That was the fun thing when you said that. You said, I wasn't always a guy that loved Jesus and really pursued him hard. And you started telling me stories about college, and I was like, Kent Scott? You mean to tell me, like, Kent Scott had that past? Like you acted like me in your 20s?
I have cut off all communication with my college friends because they know way too much. And so when Janice and I got married, we both went back to church. I hadn't been in church in many years. So over the years, one thing and another led us to just be more and more involved, and we grew together. Mm-hmm. So that was in 40 years, we had grown to a point that both of us felt very committed to Jesus, and were serving in ministry, and she was my co-leader in Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah.
And in fact, at her funeral, that whole section there was full of Celebrate Recovery people. And,
yeah.
So we had a good life together. And she was a teacher.
Yeah. Now, you told me that she had a little spunk to her, too.
That she did. Ask her daughters. Yeah, she really did. And those who know her would confirm that.
Yeah, something about, a road trip in the Dakotas. We'll leave that
we
out.
won't go into that.
So you guys are happily married. You're serving the Lord together. You're raising your family in the church, and clean bill of health up to that point, really. And then one day, she gets
actually, she had gone through heart surgery.
Yeah, told me about that.
When she was 52, and but yeah, I came home from a trip to Texas one time, and she told me that she had been having some problems. Had not told me before because she didn't want to ruin my trip to Texas.
Yeah.
And so one thing led to another, and on February the 17th, 2010, she was diagnosed with colon cancer. And that very morning, I have to show you this. That very morning in the Daily Bread, the reading for that morning was Isaiah 43, 1 through 3. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they will not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, nor shall the flames scorch you, for I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. And that was our verse throughout this whole battle. We never thought it would end in her death, but 6 months later it did.
And we'll talk about that, because I think that was one of the big challenges, right, Ken? I mean, everyone was praying. I mean, CR, just took a whole night and prayed. And you had the kind of faith that you were like, we'll come out of this.
Yeah, it never occurred to me she would die. And there were people praying. Literally, there were actually people praying in China. We had
all over the world
in China that they had actually prayed for, and so everyone was praying, and we just knew that God would answer those prayers.
Mm-hmm. And then, Carol, you were married beforehand to Jerry.
Yes.
And you guys kind of had a life-changing event happen before Jerry actually passed, and it came through church softball, right?
That's true. And we had 4 sons, and Jerry was out playing softball with the church. Norm was the captain, what do you call him? The coach, the instigator of the team. The team. And Jerry, loving baseball, carried his mitt under the seat of the truck wherever he went, and in case he had an opportunity to play. And so this night, I wasn't there, but a lot of the family was there, and it was just practice. And he was asked to play catcher because they were short, so he willingly got out his mitt and showed up on the field. And two of our sons were playing. Two of our teenage sons were also playing that night. And about 9 o'clock, I got a phone call telling me that he had had an accident and was going to be taken to the hospital, and told me I needed to come. So I went over there, Patriots Park, and there was nobody there. And finally I saw one of my sons sitting there waiting for me. Well, they had taken Jerry off to the hospital in an ambulance, and when I arrived there with my son, Jerry was going through the doors of the ER, and he said the runner was out. So this was after a collision that he had had at home plate, and it had knocked him down and broken his neck. So he was couldn't move at all below the shoulders, and he was there being examined, and he said he was ready, and I didn't know what he really meant. And so I was praying with him in the ER room, just general prayer, when we were interrupted by the doctors who were going to take him into the MRI. And later I found out that he was ready to receive Christ, and he wanted me to pray with him. And he prayed that prayer by himself in the MRI tube. So when he had come out, he told me that what he had done. And this was life-changing, needless to say, in every aspect. And I lost a lot of him at this time. A lot. He had lost everything. There was only, he was able to think, and that was about all he could do for himself. And so it was quite a journey. And later, when Pastor Ted was very faithful in volunteering to come over on Fridays, and
he would do his therapy with him, right?
Right. There was a range of motion they'd go through. And one day he wanted me to stay around, and when I would usually take that time to go grocery shopping or do something, he told me he wanted me to stay. So when I did, he wanted to make sure that I knew of his salvation. So he had Pastor Ted lead him through that prayer of acceptance, so I would know. And all this time, Jerry thought he was going to die. I mean, he thought he was going to die from the very beginning and wondered why he hadn't. And I never thought that.
I mean, you go through this life-changing event where, you have a husband that's very active. I mean, I don't know many people that carry a mitt in case a breakup, a pickup softball game happens, so you can just jump in.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's competitive. His first words to you in his injury are, "He's out."
Right.
So just want to make that clear. I got the guy out.
Yeah, he got the guy out.
But in the days that came after, I mean, did you get angry with God? Did you have, the questions that come sometimes in these kinds of events of, like, where are you? Why us? Did any of that ever come through?
As I had been walking all of my life, really paying attention to God and His Word, wasn't walking with Him necessarily intimately, but was walking toward Him, I guess, and learning about Him. And So at this point, no, I was never angry with God. I think there was too much chaos and confusion, and I didn't have time to think about.
Just survive.
The next thing is all I really thought about,
Yeah.
But he was so faithful during these times that this is where I grew intimately with God, was during this tragedy that changed our lives, and became more aware of God's presence and all of the things that he want for the next step, the grace for the next step. It seems to have been my sustaining,
Yeah.
so I could do what I did for 14 years. And it became, it was even God that gave me the contentment in that life. We had settled into that life, and there was contentment. We just both knew that was it.
It's so hard on the outside of your story to hear that and be like, man, I can't comprehend how you could be content and in that, or how you can not be angry at God and experience walking through that. But that kind of explains some of the scriptures, right? That he gives us a peace that will surpass understanding. Like, I don't understand looking at your circumstance, because we talked through in detail earlier this week that whole journey with you and him, and to hear you talk about it, like, I believe you. Like, I really believe there wasn't a moment of like, you know, you were in survival mode in some way, just going one to the next, but the grace of God that just gave you the ability to endure that, I think is one of the things that I marvel at and go, that has to be God.
Yeah.
That has to be the work of God
Yeah.
in your life.
And the more I move away from that, it's been 28 years since he was first injured. And the more I move away from that, the more I see that it was nothing that I did. Nothing did I do myself to
That
get
made
to
you
that.
sustain.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So Janice she had some problems with chemo, right?
Yes.
Like that made it very difficult to fight cancer.
Right. Literally, she did not die of cancer. She was cancer-free, and she had a really difficult time with the chemo. Eventually became septic, and that's how we lost her. And as she was in the hospital for 11 days before she passed, and I'd like to just mention that there's a couple of guys sitting right here that were there with me every day. One of them's this old white-headed guy over here. He was there all the time. He wouldn't go home, and then Bailey Abbott would come up every morning. We'd do devotions with Janice. So the support we received was fantastic, and my girls were great. So
Yeah. So you got your church community around you, your family around
so
you.
So important.
But the thing that we talked about that struck me was, you know, you have this faith that just believed we're going to come out of this. And then the day happens, right?
Yeah, and then one day she didn't. We kind of had that preview a couple of days before. And so there were a lot of prayers that she was going to come through, and then I began to pray. When I began to see that she was not, I prayed, Lord, could you just bring her back around? She was in an induced coma that she never came out of. Could you just bring her back around long enough for me to talk to her and say goodbye? Didn't happen. And then the last prayer was, okay, God, if you're going to take her, take her. Don't make me have to do it.
And
that one didn't happen either. None of the prayers that I prayed happened.
that puts you in some crises, doesn't it? As far as faith yeah. So you kind of afterwards, Ken, you know.
Yeah, when you and this can be hard for the girls to hear. When you watch your wife die, it changes you. And it changed me. And And I was absolutely, the next morning I was sitting out on my patio thinking, there is no God. This is all bunk.
Mm.
They're just, no prayers answered, prayer doesn't work, and that's because I'm praying off into some. I was angry. I wasn't angry with God. I was just angry. And went through a real crisis of faith, of even believing that, all these years, maybe it's just, I'm just praying off into some wilderness. The guys who say there is no God, they're right.
I think a lot of people in this room have had that moment.
Mm-hmm.
You got the community still around you, and people are praying, and people are saying nice things, and you're just like, I don't want to hear none of it right now.
No, don't want to hear any of it. And the other thing I did not want to hear is people quoting scripture to me.
Mm.
And
this is a good how-to list of how to not help people in grief.
Absolutely. Don't read Romans 8:28 to me. No. But as we discussed, the one thing I did was I never quit reading scripture. I'd sit out on my back patio and read, trying to get something out of it, and trying to find some kind of an answer. And I finally came to more of a conclusion that, okay, maybe it's not all about me. And what helped me come to that was, one was 2 Corinthians 5, 6, and 7 that says, so we are always confident knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. And this is the key phrase, for we walk by faith, not by sight. And I began to think, wow, maybe there's something to this. And then the other thing was when the Pharisees came to Jesus and said, okay, if you're who you say you are, show us a sign. And Jesus said, no sign will be given you except the sign of Jonah. And that was the resurrection. Mm-hmm. Jonah was in the fish 3 days, and then he was spit out. Christ was in the grave for 3 days, and he resurrected. And all of a sudden, God really came through. He said, he does that.
Yeah, right?
He does that.
I mean, I kind of feel like honestly, as I heard you tell this story in my office, I was like, this is your Job moment. This is the moment where you're questioning God, and you're like, well, you must not even be out there. You must not exist. And it seems like through these texts, as I heard you tell the story, it's kind of like that moment where God's like, you don't understand me fully because you're you and I'm me. And that's a tough moment. But I love what you said. You said, the resurrection is enough proof for me.
That was what really came through is I've got all the proof I need. Just because he didn't answer my prayers the way I wanted them answered doesn't mean he's not there. He answered the prayers the way that were the best. And that's hard to say. That's hard to think.
One of my favorite things that happened, which it's hard for me to say something like that, but I love this story, is you get asked to be an elder in the middle of the grief of everything. So you're not even sure you believe in God. And they're like, hey, why don't you be an elder at the church? And you go in for an elder interview, and you basically just throw them under the bus, and they're like, I don't even know why you guys are asking me to do this. And you gave them what for. And Kevin Scott, who's a part of Church at the Well that we support and was here, he walked out and followed you out of that elder interview. And what did he say to you? Tell me that story real quick.
He said, Kent, I think if you pray something specific, God will answer. And that really made me mad. And I told him, Kevin, how much more specific can I get?
I prayed for her to be healed. I prayed for her to wake up and let me talk to her and say goodbye. I pray for me not have to be the one that takes her. And, you're praying specific prayers, and here comes this pastor.
So what are you talking about, specific?
Yeah.
And I just blew him off. But I went home. You want me to tell the rest of the
story? Tell the story.
All right, I'll see. I've never been able to get through it. without this. So I went home, and in my journal the next day, I prayed a prayer that, okay, God, if you want something specific, here's the specific thing. Deborah had been having dreams about Janice, and they were not good dreams. They were dreams that, whereas I should have her up here say it, but that she would dream about her mother, and her mother came to her, and then she would hear this voice just saying, but she's just dead and buried in the ground. They were not good. And so my prayer was, okay, God, here's my specific prayer. If you're, this is after I come to the conclusion, all is going to be okay. If you're really there, then my prayer is that you will give Deborah a good dream. I wrote it down in my journal. 3-4 weeks later, we had been every Saturday morning, she would come over and we'd go to breakfast. And she came over that morning and she said, hey, Dad, had a dream about Mom last night, but it was a good dream. And I just was floored. And she told me what it was, that Janice had come to her and said, you can ask me any questions. And she said, okay, the questions are, do you remember us and do you worry about me? Because they were very close. And her answer was, remember you, yes, worry, no. And I'm just floored. I said, Deborah, go out on the back porch, get my journal, read certain date. And she did, and she came back, and we were both floored, you know. But it was, to me, it was just God saying, look, I'm getting pretty tired of you. And so, here it is. You want to sign, here's your sign. Now, get going and quit this hanging out, just feeling sorry for yourself. So that was a huge turning point for me.
So Carol, you guys, you're serving your husband, you love him, and you guys have your routine. And part of that routine was you would sit and talk to each other. And you played, what game would you play?
We played Scrabble every afternoon about 3 o'clock, so he could go to bed by 4.
So you guys were sitting and playing Scrabble about 14 years into his journey of, being a paraplegic. And what happened the day that he went home?
Well, I'd like to start the week before that because he had always felt really bad that he couldn't do something for me all these years. So it happened to be my 60th birthday, and he had enlisted the family to have this party for me. So they were coming and showing up, and we had the best time, and he was so pleased. And all the time, he was kind of experiencing things that he wasn't sure what it was. It was like just discomfort. Yeah. And but anyway, he was so pleased. So all that next week, we tried to figure out why he was so uncomfortable with being a quadriplegic. Your pain is not direct to where it is. It might be somewhere else, wherever you can feel. And so that particular day, we were. I was doing my normal routine, outside a lot, inside, and he was watching. I worked, he watched, and supported and encouraged, and so he had his part in that too. But on this particular afternoon, we started to play Scrabble, and we would draw a letter to say who would go first. So I drew the A, and I was getting ready to, kind of rag on him because I was going to get to go first when I heard him gasp. And then I looked up, and he looked really strange. His eyes kind of rolled back. I thought he was fainting. Yeah. And because he had done that on me once before too, but this seemed a little bit different. And anyway, long story eliminating all the detail, he died right then. His heart gave out, and so that caused a little panic in me. And some of you know Vicki and Dudley Gamble, that they happened to live next door. Well, I was yelling out the back door for him because his garage door was up.
Yeah.
And my neighbor across the street happened to hear me, so he came over and helped me, and I called 911. But it was all over. They couldn't resuscitate him, and I think my first thought was that God just said enough was enough, and took him home, and that started another journey.
Yeah. So, how did you, but to the two of you, I'd ask this, for those of us that are in the freshness, it doesn't go away. Like, this week was my wife looked at me on, I think it was Thursday night, and she said, 13 years ago today, my dad passed away. And I looked at her and said, "Oh, honey, I remember. I'm so sorry." And we, it's like it just comes back. But how do you how do you honor their memory and not live in the past, where you grow bitter and you don't ever move forward? Like, how have you guys processed grief, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, that's my verse, but that's not how I processed grief necessarily. Well, the grief itself, it goes to your core. It's a pain that is, it's just hard to describe unless you have experienced that.
It's a category 6.
Hurricane. Yeah.
And it's always there. It's there when you go to bed. It's there when you wake up, and it won't go away. And I think as I gradually began to, well, mine is kind of complicated because I did a lot of grieving before. I grieved the loss of everything Jerry did before he died. But then I lost himself, and so it was lonely, very lonely. But
I think, in answer to your question too, is that it's work. Time does not heal; work heals.
Wow.
And Grief Share was a plug for Grief Share, which is going right now, every Sunday at 4:00. Helped me immensely. The two things it did was, one was it put me with people who get it. If you have not lost someone close, at least I didn't. I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
So it put me with people who get it. They've experienced the same thing. And the other thing was that it normalized. I found out I really wasn't going crazy. And it normalized.
Well, isn't that healthy?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And then it teaches you how to deal with grief. Because as Carol said, it just, and this is where I would use that word.
Yeah.
That
You're going to say sucks, but go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say sucks, but I won't say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but that describes it better, and it just.
I don't know any better.
Millennial thing, and
Hey, you said it first. I'm just repeating what I heard.
you have to work your way through it, and it just has already been mentioned. You wake up in the morning and it's still there, and you want it to go away and it doesn't. So, but eventually it gets better, and eventually it pretty much goes away.
I got like 2 questions, and we got like no time to do it. So, at some point in time, the 2 of you, through the process of grief, decided, hey, I might want to go out on a date with someone again, or maybe one of you decided and the other got taken on the date. But how do you come to that? this is a complex thing. We probably could do a whole thing on this, but how did you come to the point of feeling like it was okay? How did you deal with some of the feelings? Because I'm sure the family had an opinion about when or if it was okay to do that, and because you guys have what seems to be a healthy marriage.
I was a widow for almost 6 years, so I was kind of in a different place than Kent was, and I would have to say, probably for both of us, that neither one of us were looking. Neither one of us even had thoughts of remarrying, and God did. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I guess so. For me, it was too soon. And I've since apologized to my girls for putting them through what I put them through. And it was too soon. I've had to apologize for Carol for putting her through.
That's what makes you a really good elder.
Yeah.
You get really good at apologizing.
Yeah, good, yeah. Because it was too soon, and she had to put up with me finishing the grief process before our marriage could really click. And but it has, and I've been very privileged to marry above my head twice in one lifetime.
Got him fooled.
Well, we talked about Grief Share. We're in that right now. And so if you're watching this online later, or if you're here, whether it's the loss of a spouse or the loss of a loved one, or honestly, it doesn't have to be fresh. For a lot of us, we never go through the grief process, at least not with any kind of intentionality. You know, unintentionally we grieve, and unintentionally, many times we don't deal with it well. I used to do a lot of prison ministry, and I don't want to equate the two, but I've always been fascinated at doing case studies. I love doing sociology. And so like downtown, I love talking to our homeless demographic, because I love to learn about the things that have happened to them in their life, and are there threads? And what was interesting when I was doing prison ministry is I was in one of the largest women's detention centers in South Carolina, and the number one conversation that every single person would tie back to when their life changed was an event where they lost a loved one and they didn't have the opportunity or anyone to help them grieve through it. And that led them down a path of doing things they never thought that they would do, and finding themselves in a place that they never thought that they would be. And the thing I want to encourage you is grief, whenever you do it in isolation, it only creates bitterness. There's not a lot of healthy healing that comes in isolation. And at Resurrection Church, we offer this program with people that have experienced what you're going through, for the sake of being able not to fix you, but of being able to say, I can understand you, and I can sit with you, and I can walk with you. And I can take what feels abnormal and makes you feel weird and as if you need to isolate from the rest of your community, and tell you that there's a community of people that can feel weird beside you, because we've been through the same kind of weird. And that's going on right now. Today they'll meet at 4 o'clock. And that's going on every Sunday at 4 for the next several weeks. If you check out our website under the event tab, you can get more information, or at the connection area at both campuses. We'd love for you to connect there. Can we give it up for Kent and Carol? Thank them for sharing their story.